A few years ago, several years ago now, a group called Dynamic Catholic did a survey, a study. They were trying to answer the question, what are the characteristics of a committed disciple of Christ? In other words, if you were going to count yourself as, yeah, I'm into my faith, I am a committed follower of Christ, what would you do? What's that look like? And they identified 4 areas. I don't think anything's going to surprise you here, but the first was prayer. They found that somebody who was a committed follower of Christ would spend about 15 minutes every week in prayer. 15 minutes a day in prayer. And the second thing was learning. They found that a committed follower of Christ wanted to keep learning about their faith, whether that was reading their Bible, reading spiritual books, watching videos, participating in some thing at a parish where they were learning in some way. They were learning more about their faith all the time, and that was about an hour and a half a week that they devoted to that. The third was stewardship. These were people that gave of their time and their talent and, yes, their money, but most importantly, they understood why they were doing that. They understood the idea of stewardship, that everything you and I have comes from God and that we are supposed to be good stewards of it. And so they tried to be good stewards of their time, talent, and treasure. And finally, they found that committed followers of Christ, in some way, they always had some aspect of evangelization in their life. Now, clearly, that didn't mean that everybody was out on the street corners preaching. People did it in all sorts of ways, whether that was just the way they talked to other people, the fact that they would share things with other people, any number of different ways, but they evangelized. I bring this up because this last line of the gospel, Jesus grew in strength and wisdom, I think should be some encouragement to us. You and I are trying to be like Jesus, and Jesus grew in strength and wisdom. As I mentioned to the children, sometimes we forget that Jesus grew up. Sometimes we forget that, yes, we believe Jesus was fully divine, but we also believe he was fully human, which meant that Jesus had to grow up. That's what humans do. So Jesus in the manger could not look at Mary and Joseph and just start talking because he was God. No, he is a little baby, and little babies don't just start talking. And so he grew up. And so that you and I thought, we might take some comfort in the fact that Jesus worked at his faith. And as I was thinking about it, I suspect that Jesus did pretty much those same 4 things. We know, you remember all sorts of stories in the gospel where Jesus prays. We'll talk about him getting up early and going out to pray, or praying into the evening, offering blessings over meals. Jesus would not have just started when he was 30 and started his public ministry. Oh, I guess I have to start praying now. That would have been something he learned to do. And many of you would know this from personal experience. Prayer is one of those things, you get better at it. I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a rocky road sometimes, but you'll get better the more you pray. It takes some effort on our part. Certainly learning about the faith, I don't know if you ever put this together, but you remember, most of you would remember this story. Jesus goes into the synagogue at Nazareth, his hometown, and he's going to, if you will, announce, if you will, his public ministry. And they give him the scroll from Isaiah. And unlike at Mass, where our readers are required to read what has been set for them, when they gave Jesus that scroll, he had a choice. Read whatever you want to out of this scroll and talk to us about it. And Jesus opened the scroll, and as it said in the story, he found the passage. In other words, he had a passage in mind that he wanted to read. He knew where it was. The only way that happens is if he had spent time in reading Torah, and, well, in this case, the prophets, reading Scripture. He had spent the time doing that, and that would be certainly a good encouragement to us. Sadly, there are lots and lots of people, they might own a Bible, but they don't really know much about it, what's in it, and how it's laid out, anything like that. They could not find a passage. The stewardship thing, Jesus clearly, he talks about it a lot. In fact, he talks about money and possessions more than he talks about prayer. So it clearly is important to him. And also, it may sound trivial, but you remember the feeding of the 5,000? What happens at the end of that story? Jesus makes sure they pick up all the leftovers. He wants to be a good steward, even of all this abundance. Doesn't want any of it to go to waste. And Jesus is an evangelist, but there again, you think that, while he wasn't a public evangelist when he was growing up, you got to figure he had learned to talk about his faith. So Jesus grew in his faith, and you and I need to do that as well. And I just wanted to encourage you. It is December 31st. Some people here, you have already started thinking about New Year's resolutions. And even if you haven't, if you're one of those people like, I don't do that, if I could encourage you, maybe you might at least want to make a spiritual resolution. Because indeed, this idea, there's a lot of good research that a marker, you say it's January 1st, I'm going to start doing whatever. That's a wonderful thing. It's mentally helpful to us in trying to take on new things, start new habits, if you will. And I can't think of a better new habit than, depending on where you are, prayer or Bible study or something along those lines. Because as I was ticking off those 4 things, some of you probably were like, oh yeah, I'm doing okay in all of those. But we could all do a little better. And for some of you, maybe there's an area of those 4, do okay on the first 3, not so much, say, on the evangelization thing. But maybe that's not because you don't really want to. It's just because you never gave it any thought. Never thought about in what way, in my circumstances, can I be an evangelist? Maybe it just takes a little effort on your part. Whatever it happens to be, I just encourage you. It's the beginning of a new year, and we can, as we continue through the Christmas season next week, celebrate the wise men. We can take one more step in our spiritual journey. Just one more step. So whether it's one more after thousands and thousands of steps, or maybe it's one more step after just a few that you just started out. It doesn't make any difference. Let's take another step, draw closer to the Lord. It'll be so much, make the new year, I would think, so much better.